I will come back. In 2007, I was 9 and my brother was 14. The kind of age gap that makes one of you the hero and the other the sidekick. Mom pressed $30 into my brother's hand and said, "Movie? Maybe a burger, home by 10. We promised. We meant it. The film was forgettable. Popcorn, explosions, blue light. The burger place tasted like salt and neon. When we stepped outside, twilight had thinned to that in-between darkness where street lamps look sleepy and sound carries farther than it should. My brother had an idea. "Let's take the lake path," he said, his voice on the edge of daring. It was a narrow paved strip that cut the long lake into 2 halves, a 2-mile ribbon of asphalt often drowned when the rains came. Tonight it was dry, and in his mind that meant opportunity. In mine it meant we'd get home faster and not be late. We rolled onto the causeway. On either side, black water. Ahead, a straight line, the kind of perfect path kids dream about. The night pressed cool against our cheeks, and for a few minutes it was peaceful. Just the soft rhythm of our wheels, the strange comfort of being between 2 small oceans. At the far end, the causeway coughed us into trees, a trailhead that slipped straight into a densely wooded preserve. No houses, no storefronts, just a cut of dirt and roots under a roof of leaves. My brother slowed and looked back at me like a captain about to declare a heading. "We'll be fine," he said. We weren't. We hadn't gone a quarter mile when the first light slid through the trunks, white and slow, like a flashlight the size of a car. We stopped instinctively and listened. An engine, low and patient. Then another from the right. 2 vehicles idling on parallel service roads you couldn't see from the map, angling toward the same invisible point. "Off the trail," my brother whispered. We dragged our bikes into the brush and crouched low. The headlights combed the trees, beams stretching long fingers over bark and fern. I imagined the light glancing off a handlebar reflector, imagined heads turning like deer, imagined hands deciding. My phone sat like a stone in my pocket. I thought of dialing Mom, of the blue rectangle flaring to life, of the way light betrays you. "Don't!" my brother hissed. "They'll see." The first set of lights crept forward and paused. A door opened close. Quiet, controlled, wrong. Voices. Men's. Muffled by distance. The words indistinct. The rhythm unmistakable. "You go there. I'll circle here." We slid farther into the brush, thorns stitching lines on our shins we wouldn't notice until morning. I could hear my brother's breath, steady and forced, like he was teaching his lungs not to panic. Mine came in tiny shivers I couldn't smooth out. The second vehicle's lights swept closer, then farther, then closer again, like a tide deciding how much shore to take. When they reached their farthest point, my brother squeezed my hand. "On 3, he said, so quiet it was almost a thought. "We run deeper. We don't stop until we hit houses." "Where?" I mouthed. He nodded into the trees as if houses could be called into existence by faith alone. 1, 2, 3. We launched. Branches clawed, roots lurched at our ankles. The forest floor tried to keep us. Behind us, Voices rose, sharper now. The beams jittered, searching, then swung wide where we'd been, not where we were. I ran like a deer that knew what headlights meant. We cut the trail at a diagonal, guessed at shortcuts that might have been circles, and chose every left like it was a prayer. The woods thinned in increments. First more sky between leaves, then a fence line, then the miracle of sodium orange hallowing a cul-de-sac. We burst into a neighborhood that smelled like sprinklers and detergent. A porch light burned 2 houses down. My brother pounded the bell while I scanned the street, mapping escape routes we hoped we wouldn't need. A man in gym shorts opened the door with a phone already in his hand. He took one look at us and stepped aside. "Inside," he said, locking the door with a click that sounded like a spell completed. He called the police. He called our mum. He stood at the window with a baseball bat, the wood glossy from use, that had nothing to do with baseball. By the time the cruisers rolled past, engines constant and reassuring, the woods were as quiet as they'd been before we entered them. No vehicles, no voices, just a trail swallowing its secrets. Mom arrived shaking. She hugged us too tight, scolded us too softly, drove us home on the most brightly lit streets in the county. The report the officers took was thin. No plates, no faces, just lights, and the kind of fear that doesn't fit neatly in boxes. For years, the night stayed a blur. The long black water, the tight breath, the decision to kill the phone's light. Only recently did I call my brother and ask the questions I'd avoided. What did you see? How close were they? Were they following us from the lake? He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was older than both of us. They weren't lost, he said. They were herding. I asked if he'd been scared that night. He laughed once, a sound with no humor in it. I couldn't say 3 without my voice breaking. I think about that whenever I cross a narrow path with water on both sides. How quickly peace turns into geometry, lines and angles, and how to not be in the cone of a headlight. How a decision as small as keeping a phone dark can be the difference between being found and being seen. And how, in the middle of a forest, 2 kids with $30 and a curfew learned what kind of night they were in. Not the kind with stars. The kind with plans you're not supposed to understand. I booked the room on a whim. Work had pushed me past exhaustion, and the road had become a tunnel of darkened headlights. The place looked harmless in the listing, a small roadside guest house tucked just far enough from the highway to promise quiet. When I arrived, the air smelled faintly of rain on warm pavement. The owner, a man in his late 60s with the kind of polite smile that never quite reaches the eyes, handed me a brass key on a fraying leather fob. "Room 3, he said. "Kitchenette stocked, TV works, and it's quiet this time of year." The room was old. Not run down exactly, but frozen. Faded floral curtains. A kitchenette with mismatched mugs. A couch with upholstery that had seen better decades. The bedspread was the color of tea left too long to steep. Everything was crammed into the space in a way that felt almost deliberate, like the furniture had been pushed closer together to keep each other company. I was too tired to care. I made a quick dinner, washed the plate, and collapsed into bed. The quiet was complete. No cars, no neighbors, just the faint whisper of wind through the trees. Sometime after midnight, I woke up. Not to a sound, not to a dream, just awake and wrong. The air felt heavier. My skin prickled as if the room itself had shifted in my absence. I sat up and listened. Silence, but a silence that pressed against my eardrums. The way you know someone is holding their breath in the same room. I told myself it was nerves, that I'd been working too much. I lay back down, staring at the faint glow of the street lamp seeping through the curtains. That's when I heard it. It came from somewhere behind the couch. Slow, measured, like fingers on glass. I got up, heart thudding, and checked the kitchenette window. Nothing. The family room. Nothing. The hallway beyond was darker than I remembered. My own shadow jumped each time I turned my head. The tapping stopped. I forced a laugh under my breath, because what else do you do when you're standing in the middle of an unfamiliar room in the dead of night, hunting ghosts you don't believe in? I went back to bed. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was a tree branch or a loose shutter. I checked out at the front desk, making some light comment about strange old buildings and their noises. The owner's smile faltered. What kind of noise? I told him, slow tapping, late at night, from the window behind the couch. He hesitated, glanced toward the empty parking lot, then leaned in. You're not the first, he said quietly. Last year, a guest heard knocking on the door around 3 a.m, yelling too. They didn't open it. Next day, when they left, I found the door frame splintered, like someone had taken a sledgehammer to it. I asked if he'd called the police. He shook his head. If word got out, no one would stay here, and I still need people to stay here. He tried to smile again, but it collapsed halfway. I realized in that moment that whatever happened that night had never really ended. It was still here, in the walls, in the floorboards, in the way his eyes flicked to the parking lot like he was expecting someone to step out from between the cars. Driving away, I checked the rearview mirror more often than I watched the road ahead. The building shrank in the distance, but the feeling didn't. Because here's the thing, I've stayed in plenty of old places, and old places have their creaks and knocks. But what I heard in that room wasn't random. It was patient. And it knew I was awake. Ha! Hello, what are